Thank you so much for following my channel. If you're not already subscribed to my videos, please make sure that you press the subscribe button as well as the little bell to get all the notifications when I upload new material. Of course, you know I love giving you good stuff, so make sure you check out the description because there's 50% off your first month with my online subscription, as well as a link to give you an absolutely free class. I'm super excited about this topic. I get this question so many times. How do I practice effectively? How do I drill at home? How do I put this movement into my practice? How do I practice in general? All of these questions. And this is so important for you to know as a student and as a teacher if you're teaching dance. Because one of the things that I've realized throughout my years of teaching is that it's not necessarily intuitive how we learn as well as break down material in order to digest it. Typically, you have to study how you learn, or you're taught how you learn in order to know that information. So I want to go over a couple things that really set myself up for success and how you can set yourself up for success. So one of the first things I want you to notice is that I have a mirror, and if you follow me in any way, shape, or form, you probably know I love whiteboards. I have a whiteboard here, whiteboards in my house, whiteboard everywhere, right? And I'm not saying you need a whiteboard, but I'll tell you why you want one, or what I'm gonna show you in just a minute so you have it for your own practice. But when I step into my space, the reason why I point this out is because I'm prepared to support myself in my practice time. So first off, I need to set aside my practice time. Sometimes you got 15 minutes, sometimes you got 5 minutes, and sometimes you have an hour. Oh Lordy, if you have an hour, that is amazing, right? But when you step into your space and you've carved out that time for yourself, you have to make that time effective for you. Otherwise, you may feel like it's a waste of time. You didn't really get what you wanted to done. Oh, I thought I would get this, and then you felt really scattered, and then you just don't even know where the time went. So I want to give you a couple things to keep mind of in order to have a really effective practice. So one of the things that I want you to have set up in your space that's very helpful is a recording device. So it is ready to go. Your music device is ready to go. Essentially, all the technology that you need in order to practice is ready to go in the space you normally dance in. So if it's typically your phone, but you usually have your phone, then have your tripod ready where you can put your phone on that. If you are recording on an external device, then you have that device on a tripod ready to go. Furniture is cleared out before you get into your practice time if you can. I know a lot of us are practicing at home, so you might not be able to just move the couch and keep it there all week, right? But if you can carve out anything, then try and keep that space carved out as much as possible, as long as possible, okay? Have good lighting so that way when you see your video, you're not like, oh crap, I can't see, it's too small, right? And then you're like, eh. So have your space set up ready for your success. Have a whiteboard, all that stuff, and I'll break it down if you don't have a whiteboard. Okay, the other thing that I want you to be aware of is to minimize your distractions. Tell people you are in a meeting. This is your time for you. If you want to get shit done, then people gotta not bother you, right? And the only way they're not gonna bother you is if you tell them, don't bother me. Of course, unless it's an emergency or you have to be responsible for something else. Kids, wait, the mic's over here, kids, and all that stuff, I totally get it. But when you can have that carved out time for yourself without interruptions, schedule your dance practice around that time as much as possible. Eliminate distractions. Turn your phone on airplane mode. Most of us are working from home, so if someone really needs to get a hold of you, they can either physically come get you or they can wait literally 15 minutes, right? And if you need to keep your phone on, just put it on silent so that way, one, it's not ringing the whole time and it's not disruptive when it rings. This is one of the reasons why I highly suggest that you get an external recording device that isn't your phone. If you can, even use an old phone. It's totally fine, because if someone is trying to call you, it's gonna halt that recording and then you'll miss out on the material of which you were dancing and you wanted to go back and look at that stuff, right? So minimize your distractions. The other thing that is very helpful is because there are so many distractions going on, we need stuff to help us keep focused focused. So when you go into your dance space, like when I have 15 minutes to dance and practice, I'm not trying to get 4 or 5 things done. Hell no, that is too much in that small amount of time. I'm focused on one thing only. And when I'm focusing, I use my mirror, I use my whiteboards, and sometimes I also use this, and I tell my private lesson students this all the time as well, is to laminate a piece of paper or something that's reusable so you don't have to find a new piece of paper every time, and write what you want to work on down on your paper. So let's say I'm working on hip circles, right? Boom, boom. I'm gonna write hip circle at the top. Maybe I'm improvising and I'm working on improvising and putting hip circles, but you're literally just gonna write your thing down and place it in front of your face as my Post-its come off this paper. Place it in front of your face where you're gonna be facing when you dance. If you're facing the camera and you're looking into the camera, place it under the camera. If you're gonna be facing another wall, place it on the wall for yourself. If you have a specific element that you are working on, like tailbone down, and I just put an arrow because I like signs, it makes it easier, less things to write, then you would write tailbone down of your hip circle, so that all makes sense. This is really, really important because the mind gets distracted. You get lost in the music, you want to do this, you want to do that, and then you're going to be like, oh my God, what am I practicing anyway? And so when you have those reminders around for you in order to keep you focused, that's going to be super helpful. I'm using my pants, by the way. I literally just cut these pants an hour ago, and I was like, I'll use these till I clean this paper. Anyway, so I wanted you to have this information because I see a lot of us getting distracted and not being able to focus, and being okay with focusing on one thing at a time, thinking it's boring, it's redundant, or it's like, it's silly, I'm not getting far. The fact of the matter is, people who are masterful at their craft focus on one element at a time as they build their repertoire of expertise, right? Have you guys heard that saying of like, I don't fear the guy who can do 1,000 kicks, I fear the guy who's done one kick 1,000 times, right? Because that is some badassery right there, and that person would probably kick my ass, right? So I'm like, oh, but it goes to show you that it's not about, you gotta be doing everything all at once, you gotta keep yourself focused. And I wanna go over 3 elements that in your practice, when you're practicing something, how to break it down in a way that helps you actually start to clean up the technique around it. One is, you really gotta videotape. You just have to. Even if you were doing live classes, live online, in person, doesn't matter. You need to be videotaping what happens in between classes. I can't emphasize enough how important that is to not only video record, but you have to go back and watch it too. Don't just video record and then not watch it, because that defeats the purpose. But you gotta go back, watch that footage, and look and see the being that's on there, what is missing, right? So you might be asking yourself, well, what do I need to practice? What do I need to focus on? If I can only choose one thing, what do I do? Right? There's so many things to choose from. I have like 17 things that I suck at dance, which by the way, you don't suck at. It's just something you haven't done well yet, right? So how do we get focused on that one element? For me, I ask myself, what is the one thing that's missing that if I put into place would have the biggest impact on my dance? And sometimes that's breath work, sometimes that's posture, sometimes it's hip circles. Maybe you got repeated feedback from your teachers that say, oh, your hip drops need a lot of work. They're not isolated enough. You're not generating it correctly, so on and so forth, right? So you're gonna choose the thing that if you put in place would make the biggest impact for you, or choose the thing that you are just finding really as a huge challenge right now that you've been wanting to put some time into, something that really compels you to want to practice. This is okay. Practice doesn't have to be a certain way for what you have to practice, right? But you do want to show up ready to work, because it will take work on your part. And one of those things is being okay with redundancy. as a discipline, being okay with repetition and going slow. It is a huge thing that we are not comfortable doing because we take it as a sign of failure, and it's not. You should take it as a sign of mastery. Take it as a sign of mastery if you'd like, because people who go slow and intentional really create some really amazing impacts. So the first component I want to talk to you, or the first factor I want to talk to you about is the components of what you are working on. So now that you've chosen what you're working on, you're going to work on the components behind it. And what I mean by that, or what are the components? Let's take our hip circle and that tailbone, right? If I am doing an external hip circle and I'm going around like this and I'm shifting my weight back and forth, I want to know, how do I create this hip circle? What needs to be done in my body to create a hip circle? And maybe you don't have it there yet, that's why you're working on it, and maybe it looks like this right now, and that's okay. So take an example from someone who has their hip circle like spot on. And you'll notice we're gonna break it down and just use hip circle as an example, but you can do this with undulations, you can do this with concepts, you can do anything with this. Two components that make up hip circle, an external hip circle. It is a hip slide, left to right, shifting the weight onto one side, then the other through your center axis, and then a hip slide, front to back, changing the weight to the toes, and as you come back, the tailbone remains elongated. So you're gonna break it down in such a way that you're like, if I were to hand this to someone else, they would understand what it looks like, right? So you slide left, right, and then when you come front and back, your tailbone has to stay down, and you can only go as far as your posture lets you forward, because you're not leaning. We don't drop our shoulders. That's another component to mark. Shoulders stay in place over the feet, right? So you're marking all of these components. You have to identify. The clearer you identify something, the cleaner your dance is going to be. Absolutely. I can almost like promise you this, but you got to identify the correct components first off of what you're looking for, and then being very specific and precise about it. Just don't say, well, I move my hip to the side and then I kind of push it front and back. That doesn't make a hip circle, because I could do this and that doesn't do anything, right? And that's not the component. Then the final component is I string it together in a circular path, shifting my feet, shifting my weight from one foot to the toes to the other foot to the heels, and I repeat that cyclical pattern. Right? So you want to be specific and clear about the components. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to do those components slow and intentionally. So this part is hard for people. This I find is the hardest part. The component actually is pretty difficult too if you haven't really analyzed your movement before to really clean up your technique or concept or stage presence or anything like that. But the slowing down part, remember what I said a moment ago, that slowing down and repetition is a discipline? I mean it. It is hard to stay in it and not try and push it through so you can just get it over with, right? Because it feels like we suck. It does, it really does. I totally get it, because I'm human too, you're human. We all feel this, right? And so we're like, oh, I just want to get it over with. It should have been done yesterday. It should have been better yesterday, but it just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't, the way we learn, right? So what I'm going to do when I say go slowly is I'm going to push my hips side to side. And when I go side to side, I don't mean this kind of slow. I mean like micro movement. I call them micro movements. You go slow and you feel the gradual increase of your weight shift into that foot. But also what I'm looking for is when I'm doing it, can I keep components accurate? Can I keep the components accurate, or am I doing this? See that difference? Out with the hip, out with the body, right? And as you're doing it slowly and paying attention, you're gonna learn a couple things. One is you're gonna learn how it feels when it's not correct, and two, you're gonna learn how it feels when it is correct. Because what you're gonna do after you do it slowly is you're gonna break it, or you're gonna refine the movement and adjust what needs to be adjusted, and then do it again. So if I'm here and I'm coming to the side with my body, I'm like, oh, no, remember, shoulders need to stay over the feet. So what happens if I just keep this here and shift my shoulders back, keep my posture up? Oh, this is how it's supposed to feel? Okay, let me do it again. Shift over, shift over. Is my shoulder, yeah, it's starting to move. Okay, come back. Ah, got it, okay, again. And you repeat that process until you're like, boom. You can feel it slide and that these start to not move. You do the same with the front, same with the other side, and then same with the tailbone, right? And remember, we were working on tailbone, so then you would break that piece down. If you start ducktailing here, how do you keep your tailbone elongated and your pelvis neutral as you come back? So you're gonna make those micro movements, moving along your technique, and then readjusting it, refining it, and then going back into it. So that is the third component is refining, and then you're going to repeat, okay? So if you don't have a notebook and some paper, highly recommend that you get it, and you make note of these things, okay? Break down the components and how everything works. Slow it down and make it intentional. You want to feel those micro movements happening. Then you need to refine the movement, adjust what isn't working and how it doesn't fit into the ideal components of what you're doing. Adjust it to make it closer to this, and essentially you repeat this process over and over until you get the desired result. So my desired result is I would love a hip circle that, one, is technically correct, but feels natural on my body, that it now looks effortless. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, and reverse 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, boom, right? So I'm gonna keep going with this until I do that. And you might be asking yourself too, how long does this take? It takes as long as you give it, right? I could break this down and just this one side in 30 seconds, given that I know the components. And it will, I'm not saying it becomes fully refined. I'm just saying you can go through this entire process within a short amount of time. So if you have 15 minutes, you can really repeat this process. And videoing helps you see, are you moving along the process in the right direction? Because maybe your adjustments aren't quite the adjustments that need to be made. So your video recorder is there to help you make sure that you keep on track with those things, okay? So, you know the components, how they're done, slow it down, do it intentionally and super slow, and then refine the movement, adjusting it, making sure that it looks more accurate, it's more precise, and then repeating all of those things. This will help you really get an effective practice no matter how much time you have or what you are working on. And remember what I had said, the clearer you define something, the cleaner the movement will be. Super, super important, especially if you're looking to get fantastic results in your dance practice.